Hello and welcome back to your Aura Rasa coaching podcast. Or if you're a first-time listener, welcome. My name is Aura Rasa Sima. I help people to increase their EQ and I am your host. Today I want to chat about a topic that I thought about a lot in the last 2 weeks because two leadership experts, I'm not sure if I should name them or not, so for now I will just not name them, but one is the number one leadership expert, and I had a training with him last month. And the other one is, also very famous and the number one expert in his field. And both of these experts, I listen to them a lot, and typically every word they say makes sense to me. And they know more than me. They're more experienced. They're in the market for a longer period of time. So they are great. And can you imagine how surprised I was? Over the course of just a week, both said something very similar that I didn't agree with. Now, obviously, I sat back and I tried to find the error in my thinking. I assumed there must be an error in my thinking if both of these experts have the same opinion and it's different than mine. But I have to say, after weeks of thinking, I came to the conclusion that I respectfully have to disagree on this single point. Let's not be secretive. So what is this point? It is about self-will, stubbornness, and being opinionated. Before I share some information with you, I would like to point out that there might be a gender difference. I'm a woman, I'm 48, so when I was young it was obviously a different time. Whereas, if I look at the Me Too debate, I'm wondering how much different the time really was. So my point here is, most of the authority figures in my life were male. Whether it was in my career, at school, most of them were male. And they all had an idea who I should be, what I should do, and I'm not sure if it's only a female thing, but I do believe it happens to females more often that someone thinks they have to tell the female how they should live their life, how they should behave, all of these things. If I would have listened to everyone who told me what I should be, what I should do, I wouldn't be here happy chatting with you. Alright. So, on self-will, stubbornness, and being opinionated, this is what I came up with. Self-will and being opinionated are brothers in a way. The first post I saw by one of these experts spoke against being opinionated and implied that opinionated people are inflexible and closed-minded, unable to listen, unwilling to change. It was the first time I disagreed with something written by this leader. If you know me, you know I am opinionated and I have a strong sense of self-will. Therefore, I belong to the group targeted by the post, and that's not something you can just ignore. Because I value this person and his teachings a lot, I sat back, as I said, and reflected on his arguments and statements. Should I change? Should I change my training material? After all, I just released Project Confidence, a self-coaching program that helps people to increase their feeling of self-worth and self-confidence. So I asked myself, does having an opinion make me unable to listen? Is my self-will egoistic? Is my mind closed when I formed an opinion about something? Is having a point of view a sign of ignorance? Being agreeable is an instinct. Therefore, I wondered for a minute if I should share my conclusion. Then again, if you are a regular visitor to my article section or to this podcast, or a client, you are here because you know who I am. You know what I stand for and what makes me tick. Self-will and other virtues. There are a lot of virtues people aim to possess. But first, let me give you the translation of the German word for stubbornness. It's Eigensinn, and it's translated own sense. Something that has own sense. Someone stubborn follows his own sense. As opposed to what? Here are a few virtues that I found listed on a homepage about good parenting. Being on time, humbleness, honor, excellence. And don't get me wrong, these are not bad traits per se. What they do have in common, though, is that they have been invented to make us followers, easy to control, follow the laws, the rules of society, and other people, for instance, a manager. Self-will is the only virtue that is about following ourselves. Own sense. I know that own sense is not a word, and I hope you'll forgive me for using it. If you know a better one, just drop me a note. This is not a call for a revolution or becoming antisocial. Revolution is war and I stand for happiness and peace. A society can only work if everyone accepts and fulfills their role. But that does not mean thinking for yourself and being aware that you accept a role is a bad thing. Every virtue turns into a negative in an extreme. The person who is good with money versus the cheap person, etc. A quote by Alfred Herrhausen, "The world is not a talking shop, decisions have to be made." So why do stubbornness, self-will, and opinion have a bad reputation? If you look at the history of the world, all impactful change makers for the better or worse were stubborn, self-will, and opinionated. Just think of Mandela, Socrates, or if you are religious, Jesus Christ. Once someone achieved success, we're willing to call it charismatic, a lot of personality, individualist. But until then, we consider self-will a character flaw. We group people into followers and leaders. Followers do not follow their own sense. They fulfill someone else's vision. Our economic system would crash if everyone would think for themselves, ask questions, and only do what made sense to them and served their growth. It can only work because most people follow orders. Explaining, influencing is much more exhausting than just giving orders. It's understandable that the very teachers who tell us about the heroes, the self-willed people of ancient times, teach us to be compliant. Self-will and egoism. Egoism. Self-will, following your own sense, is egoistic, but egoistic in a good sense, not in the greedy or ruthless way. Every creature beside humans and the pets they tame follows their growth instinct to become the best version of themselves. They follow an inner law. Or we could say calling. Every creature, everything follows its calling. The inner voice that leads them to do what's the best growth strategy for them. People and many other creatures also have the need for closeness, ergo the herd instinct. It's also shared protection. While the compromises one must make to be a part of a herd are not endangering our health and happiness, the sacrifices, for instance a fabric worker in the assembly line at Apple's partner in China has to make, are endangering his health and limit his growth. Can you imagine a herd of 100 animals where 2 animals get 90% of the food and all others have to chew on a few leftovers? Perhaps even toxic leftovers? But that is how our trickle-down economy works. It cannot work if everyone follows their growth instinct. Our current model is based on exploitation and can only work if the vast majority of people are obedient. The more unnatural we live, the higher the suicide, depression, drug abuse rates. Not everyone who gives you orders has your best intentions in mind. Without self-will, you will neither become the best version of yourself nor have a lot of success and happiness in your life. Everyone has an agenda. I repeat, everyone has an agenda. And the agenda is always selfish. Some are perhaps more selfish than others, but even the people who get a feeling of fulfillment by helping others do it for the feeling of fulfillment that they're seeking. Even if it makes me feel good about myself to help you with free advice, there is a selfish component in that. I might also hope that if I help you now, you'll keep my services in mind and perhaps allow me at a later point to serve you or recommend me. There are more or less evil agendas, but everyone has an agenda. The point is, you have to think for yourself to make educated decisions. To become your best, happiest, you have to have self-will. Emotional intelligence helps you to understand someone's agenda. Emotional intelligence also helps to influence stubborn people, such as myself. The two biggest groups of people who join my emotional intelligence training are people who want to remove scars from living a life against their own sense, and salespeople. The first group is easy to understand. It's people who have been hurt, who want to gain back control over their minds to achieve more success and happiness. But the second group? Why salespeople? It's simple. Salespeople constantly have to influence people they have no authority over. They cannot order C-level managers to buy. It gets even more tricky when the manager is a senior and the salesperson is in his early 20s. People with a high EQ are great at influencing self-willed people. They possess the necessary amount of empathy, listening and communication skills, self-awareness and social awareness to influence and persuade. My last words? Every virtue turns into a negative in the extreme. Having an opinion means you thought about something. It does not imply you're not open to listen and change your opinion. The world needs more people who think for themselves. Opinionated people with self-will are harder to manipulate. The biggest change makers in the history of the world have been stubborn. People with emotional intelligence have a strong self-will. We have to understand someone's agenda to decide if they will harm us or support our growth. So that was that. And listen, I have a free workshop coming up on Saturday. I'm gonna drop the link in the description. It's an emotional intelligence workshop, and I'd love to meet you there. All right.